Another episode of New Maroon Getaway, Life Examined by an aspiring 21st century Maroon. We're going to continue reading through the piece, the Richard Heinberg piece, Human Predators, Human Prey. This is going to be part 2. In this part of the essay, he begins to get more into examining the actual human elements within this analogy of society as ecosystem. I think this one is this is going to be, I think, particularly interesting to most of you listening. So just to get started. So this is section 4, our current context, the adaptive cycle, conservation, and release. As we've seen, predator-prey relationships shape the flow of energy through ecosystems. But what happens in either a natural ecosystem or a human social ecosystem, quote unquote, when energy flows increase? As long as sufficient basic nutrients are available and other conditions, such as climate, are stable, the system tends to grow in size in terms of biomass and or complexity. And that is exactly what has happened within the human ecosystem, quote unquote, especially during the past century or so. We humans learned to use exosomatic energy. That is, energy apart from what is released from food through metabolism. When we started using fire several 100,000 years ago, the domestication of draft animals, particularly horses, oxen, and mules, and the harnessing of water power and wind power, at first with sails and then later with windmills, this increased our access to exosomatic energy. So again, the discussion of energy, or really appreciating what it is that energy is, and then how energy is represented or facilitated by a number of different means, which would also include financial means. This is central to everything that we're talking about, because basically what we're trying to figure out is, how do you get access to energy? How do we get access to work capacity? Because it's by means of having access to work capacity that in the societal sense, this is how we're able to secure or gain access to products and services that allows us to live a life, to facilitate our lives, and ultimately to build wealth. More recently, technological developments, including metallurgy and the invention of the steam engine, opened the way to our use of fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and natural gas. And this is a very important point, is how technology has facilitated our ability to be able to do more work. Being that human beings have large brains, giving us the ability to develop tools, which allows for us to be able to amplify our ability to do work. This has really been, functionally speaking, a major development. Fossil fuels, representing tens of millions of years worth of chemically stored sunlight, or fossilized sunlight, enabled our global per capita use of energy to grow by more than 800% in the past 150 years. With the confluence of science, technology, and fossil energy, many things became possible that were barely dreamt of previously, including aviation, global electronic communications, the mass production of goods, and a way of life, for some at least, characterized by lavish consumption. Human population grew from under 1 billion 2 centuries ago to 7.5 billion today. Cities and nations exploded in size, trade soared in volume, speed, and distance, and the destructive power of weaponry became global in scope. And I think the degree to which the way that we're living now, as opposed to what has marked the vast majority of human history, this is something that it's very hard for us to appreciate this. And this is why probably one of the most dangerous things for us collectively is to have the kind of historical, either historical myopia or historical ignorance, which causes us to really not correctly read or be able to read what it is that's happening and reference that against, again, what it is that has happened in the past. This is sort of the collective blind spot that unfortunately is likely to come back and bite us in the tail, so to speak. The environmental impacts of human activities also skyrocketed. The rate of extinctions of species, mostly due to habitat destruction, rose to 1,000 times the normal rate. Glaciers began melting due to a warming atmosphere, itself due to the buildup of greenhouse gases from the burning of fossil fuels, raising sea levels. Topsoil began disappearing at higher rates, currently at a rate of over 25 billion tons per year. I've also seen that rate estimated at about 3 times that amount, but 24 to 25 billion tons per year is what you'll often see cited in a lot of the authoritative data. Now, the reason why that's significant is civilizations are built on soil. They're built on the productive capacity of landscape. And the productive capacity of landscape, the functional capacity of landscape, is really predicated on whether or not you actually have soil that is fertile, is capable of holding water, transferring nutrients, growing vegetation, et cetera, et cetera. Dead zones appeared in oceans around the mouths of rivers due to fertilizer runoff. Fertilizer of which is currently in our industrial world is all based off of fossil fuels, so petroleum and natural gas. Huge gyres composed of bits of discarded plastic made from fossil fuels, again, appeared in oceans, endangering sea life. Fish species began dying off due to overpredation by humans. Again, this is all fueled by or facilitated by our ability to create technology, which is, I think, an interesting point to bring up or to make sure we keep in mind, because basically what has happened is technology has allowed for us to be able to amplify our destructive behavior or destructive tendencies. Indeed, nearly all classes of wild animals declined severely in number, with half of all wildlife having disappeared in the last 40 years. It has been estimated that humans, along with our cattle, pigs, dogs, cats, and other domesticates, now make up over 95% of all terrestrial mammalian biomass. It is clear that humans' impacts on the biosphere will ultimately be self-limiting. Economic growth and population growth, which have driven those impacts, are subject to ultimate checks, including the depletion of fossil fuels, minerals, soils, and water, as well as the buildup of pollution, including greenhouse gases causing climate change. As I have written elsewhere, it is extremely unlikely that humanity will be able to keep the growth party raging by other means, such as renewable energy or nuclear power. The best we can hope for is an equitable, peaceful, and relatively happy descent from current levels of population and consumption, right? So basically the best we can hope for is, instead of getting completely just totally destroyed or sort of kicked in the face, maybe the kick could be turned into a slap. But either way, it's probably going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It's just how bad. Any population biologist looking at recent trends in human population would conclude that our species is in overshoot, a condition in which a population temporarily exceeds its environment's long-term carrying capacity. In nature, overshoot is always temporary and is followed by die-off. One accounting tool for measuring the degree of our overshoot is the ecological footprint, which represents the demand on biocapacity, i.e., area of biologically productive land and water required to produce the ecological services, including resource regeneration and waste absorption for a given population. Another term that's often used sort of in the academy, so to speak, is ecosystem services. So basically as the environment or the ecological infrastructure, as that is diminished in its kind of structural integrity and functional integrity, the services that would be made available to those who are living in and among those places, you simply don't have those services available to you. So generally speaking, they're under 4 categories. So they're the provisioning services, the regulating services, the supporting services, and what are sometimes called the cultural services. I'll save that for another time. According to the Global Footprint Network, humanity is currently using over 1.5 times Earth's worth of resources annually, though this consumption is not distributed equally. So, for example, it would take 4 Earth's worth of resources to support U.S. consumption levels. So if everybody was consuming as much as is consumed in the United States, instead of 1.5 times, it would be 4 times. So this is only possible by drawing down future productive capacity. Important point. In effect, borrowing from future generations. To the extent that we are today eroding the carrying capacity on which future generations would otherwise depend, our way of life could be characterized as intergenerational predation. So again, another important point, intergenerational predation. To put it crudely, the old are eating, quote unquote, the young.